Creed 3 had a lot of things going for it. A talented cast, a release date wherein its only major competition for the weekend was a different Part 3 that had a record-setting second-week drop-off for its respective franchise, a proven track record of solid, albeit modest success for the previous two films, and one of the most buzzed-about news stars in Hollywood playing the villain. The only X factor was first-time director Michael B. Jordan making his debut behind the camera in a project where the margin for error was pretty much entirely on him. But with all those other things working in the film's favor, seems like all MBJ had to do to pull off a win here was not the bed too badly. So what were the results? Does Jordan have directorial chops to rival his acting ones? Is Creed 3 a worthy entry in the Rocky Creed franchise? And how'd he do in the chair when the pressure was on full blast? Honestly? Not too bad at all. Okay, full disclosure, I haven't seen the other two Creed movies. Not for any particular reason, boxing was just never my thing. But I didn't have anything else to talk about this weekend, and I figured if the movie's good, I shouldn't have too much trouble following what's going on. And I didn't. That's one of the better things I can say about it. It makes itself very accessible. Sure, there's continuity there, but it's not so labyrinthine that you need to have seen a whole bunch of other stuff before you see this one. I didn't know who some of the characters were, or some of the things from the previous movies when they were talked about, but I got caught up pretty fast. It's all laid out very simply. I never felt lost or confused, and when it was over, I wanted to go find the first two movies and watch those. So if you're like me and you haven't experienced the Creed franchise before, that's not a prerequisite for Creed 3. Seeing the other movies will probably add to your enjoyment, but you don't need to have seen them to understand what's going on here, so don't let that stop you. And don't let reservations about the Rocky situation stop you either. That was, like, the one thing with the movie that people seem to be concerned about. What the hell? Why isn't Rocky in it? From what I know from the trailers and Wikipedia and stuff, him and Creed had this relationship that was pretty central to these movies, and he's the one who started this whole thing. Wouldn't it be weird if he's not there? Why wouldn't you want Rocky in the film? So I was questioning that decision, didn't really agree with it before I saw the movie, but I'll say this. Even though Rocky isn't there, you don't really miss him. And that's not a shot at Stallone or anything, but for the story they're telling, Rocky wasn't necessary. And it's not like they completely excised him or anything. He gets mentioned several times, and the events of the Rocky movies still carry a lot of weight with what happens here, so they made sure to pay Rocky respect. And while I do think there may have been something to be gained by including him in a cameo or something, even if it's just for a minute, I'm not sure where the hell they could have fit him in, because there's a ton of non-Rocky related stuff going on, and you don't want anything distracting from that. There's a lot of really personal backstory to explore with Creed and Jonathan Majors' character Damien, and I love the story of this. How their rivalry isn't about a championship or a grudge. Well, it is about a grudge, but not a boxing grudge. And there's so much here. How they were as close as brothers when they were kids, and they still are, except now Damien is sitting on 18 years worth of pent-up resentment because of this incident in their past, for which they both had their share of blame, but Damien was the one who got punished for it, whereas Creed got dealt a better hand. And when Damien comes back, you can tell there's still that bond between them, but now there's also this huge elephant in the room that neither of them want to address, and all it takes is one little nudge to send Damien off the deep end. And what's cool about this is they never make it one-sided. Yeah, Damien is technically the villain, but with the way the incident that sent him away for years plays out, it wasn't totally on Creed, but it wasn't totally on Damien either. So I think it's actually kind of borderline as to whose side you take in this whole thing and who you end up rooting for. I was never totally sure myself. I didn't agree with how Damien handled the situation, and yeah, he made bad choices along the way, but he also got really screwed over in a situation that wouldn't have happened if Creed hadn't made some pretty bad choices too. And Jonathan Majors really kills it in this role. For starters, the dude is built like a fucking juggernaut, so damn did he work his ass off for this part, but I'm becoming more and more impressed with this guy as an actor. I've now seen him as Damien and as two separate versions of Kang, and each character has been completely different. This guy has some serious chops. He says so much with subtle looks, and gestures, and you can tell there's a lot of conflicting emotions going on inside Damien. He's definitely angry, but there's also insecurity there, there's sadness, there's guilt, there's remorse. I never even got the sense that he liked what he was doing, but there's just so much bottled up inside this guy that something had to give. So that relationship with him and Creed is really interesting, and his performance is great. And the rest of the cast, too. Michael B. Jordan's great in everything, I don't have to tell you that, but he goes for some pretty deep dramatic cuts here. There's a subplot with Creed's mom especially that really hits him with that emotional gut punch. It was some surprisingly poignant stuff, actually. Plus, there were no child actor problems here. The little girl playing Creed's daughter, she was very good, and it was nice to see Tessa Thompson back on give-a-shit duty after she punched out during Thor: Love and Thunder. So the acting, the characters, all very good, very solid stuff. Nothing to complain about with any of that. The way I see it, the movie only has two notable flaws. First, the story has to jump through a lot of hoops to explain how Damien gets his big title fight. Now, to the film's credit, it is very aware of how flimsy of a premise that is, and it takes a lot of pains to set up how... yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, and it could only happen because of really special circumstances, so they do try to make it seem at least somewhat plausible. Still, it could never happen in the real world. I think you buy it in the context of the movie, but you have to take some things with a grain of salt. The other flaw, unfortunately, has to do with the directing. Now, overall, I would call MBJ's first time in the director's chair a success. For, like, 95% of this movie, I thought he was doing very well for himself. You wouldn't know this was an inexperienced director. Everything looked really tight and polished, and there were some shots in there that were just... really good stuff. So if Jordan wants to keep directing after this, I say, yeah, go for it. Give the dude another movie. But maybe with a little more oversight next time. There's a sequence during the climax, you'll know it when you see it, that I really wish somebody had tried to talk Jordan out of. It's hard to describe without spoiling something, but for a few minutes, the movie gets not metaphysical exactly, but he makes some outside-the-box choices that I think were meant to highlight just how serious and how personal the fight was for Creed and Damien. But instead the opposite happens. It doesn't fit at all with the rest of the scene. It feels incredibly awkward and out of place. It's weirdly cartoonish, and it's easily the worst directed sequence of the whole movie. It takes you out of the film immediately. I can respect Jordan wanting to take a risk and do something creative, but this just didn't work. Now thankfully it's only for a minute or two, and as soon as it's over we're back in business, but that's what's so weird about it, because the sequence cuts right out. You get rid of that, and the climax is a lot better for it. I don't know how that scene made the final cut. That should not have been in there. And it was the one strange blemish on what was otherwise a really solid directing job. So that kind of takes the wind out of the sail in the third act, unfortunately, and it does lose a good amount of tension because of this. I think it recovers enough afterward that the final fight still works for the most part, but not as well as it would have without that sequence, and that's a bit of a shame. Overall, though, I enjoyed Creed 3. It's got a compelling story, good characters, great acting, no annoying politics, and it doesn't require you to see the first two films to have fun with it. I didn't know much about them going in, all I wanted was to be entertained, and I was. And it made me want to go and watch those movies now, so I think it did its job really well. And Michael B. Jordan has a real future as a director. Just, you know, maybe get a second opinion on the final cut next time. Thanks so much for watching, and while you're here, do all the other YouTube things. Ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. Links are in the description box, and most importantly, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, share the video, subscribe, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to have its shit pushed in by a jacked AF, pissed off ex-con looking to unload 18 years worth of seething hostility on him is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. So take care, stay tuned, I'll see you next time.